What's going on, everyone? Welcome back. Today we have got our Week 6 fantasy wide receiver starts and sits for every single matchup, so make sure to tune in. And if you guys enjoy, hit that like button, subscribe. Also, give us a follow on Twitter at AllDayPigskin to continue interacting with us as the week progresses. Shoot us your questions there, and we will do our best to answer them. And also, check out our website at alldaypigskin.com. Sign up for a free newsletter to get free exclusive content. All that information in the description. But for now, let's get right into it. Before getting into our breakdown, we want to give you guys a quick word from our sponsors at Overlay Fantasy Sports, who we've actually been using since the start of the NFL season, specifically their matchup shop function, which is absolutely awesome. And let's face it, betting on the same old Team A versus Team B game can get a little bit boring. Well, that's where the matchup shop function comes into play, as it allows you to bet on individual player matchups. All you have to do is put your bet in terms of who you think will have a higher fantasy performance. And it's incredibly simple as well. Just like a normal bet would work, you've got your different spreads, anywhere from Thursday night football to Sunday's games, or even Monday night football. You can have a number of different possibilities and choices. You will find a bet that you love, whether it's two running backs versus each other, two quarterbacks, two wide receivers. Honestly, it's all there. And if you guys want to even get a couple different bets going, Overlay Fantasy allows you to do that, as well as you can put single bets, but you can also get a couple of bets together on one matchup slip and get a big parlay going for a big time payout. And honestly, if the NFL isn't your thing, have no fear. Overlay Fantasy has got other options like golf, MLB, and the NBA. So make sure to check it out and have all that homework you're doing not only benefit your fantasy squad, but your wallet as well. Our first match of the week, we have got the Chicago Bears at the Carolina Panthers. And in terms of wide receivers, let's start with the best option here in Allen Robinson. Now, we continue to only list Allen Robinson for the Bears, but that remains the fact going forward, because we've said it before, we'll say it again. Offensively, the Bears are limited at the quarterback position. They just can't maintain more than one fantasy relevant wide receiver. But silver lining, that is Allen Robinson by far. He is a target machine. And in terms of PPR scoring, the guy's pretty much a top 15 wide receiver every single week. But let's also mention that defensively, the Panthers are actually all right versus the pass. It's versus the run where they really struggle. And we think due to game flow, Robinson might not have that same ceiling that he normally does, because this should be a run-heavy game for the Bears, featuring David Montgomery. For that reason, we probably see Robinson more so as a high-end wide receiver 2 on the week. As far as the Panthers, Robbie Anderson, DJ Moore. Anderson emerging as the wide receiver 1 for the Panthers. DJ Moore coming off a nice game versus the Falcons, but I think that ends here versus this great Bears defense. Robbie Anderson, I see him as a low-end wide receiver 2. DJ Moore probably an even lower floor. I think this will just be a very low-scoring game. I don't anticipate a lot of points. Maybe in a PPR type of scoring, you feel a little bit better about Robbie Anderson with the amount of targets he's been getting. But otherwise, I'm not all that high on the pass catchers for the Panthers. That's why you also see Curtis Samuel as a sit. Outside of some gimmick plays as a running back, Samuel isn't contributing much to this passing attack. It's Anderson, Moore, and Mike Davis. And then, like we said before, outside of Allen Robinson, we can't trust any other wide receiver. Anthony Miller, whoever it might be, they are sits in terms of Chicago Bears. Then we've got the Broncos at the Patriots. This was a game that was supposed to take place in Week 5, postponed now until Week 6, which actually could benefit the Denver Broncos if that gives Drew Lock an extra week to get healthy. And that would be a slight increase in terms of upside for Jerry Jeudy. We currently have Tim Patrick listed as a start, and that would be because KJ Hamler not 100% right now. Patrick has played very well in those instances when he's gotten an opportunity. And if Gilmore still remains on the COVID IR designation and doesn't suit up here, great opportunity for both of these guys. We think Jeudy is a low-end to mid-level wide receiver 2, and then Tim Patrick, probably a low-end wide receiver 2 as well. As far as the Patriots, again, this will be very dependent on Cam Newton's status, who's also on that COVID IR designation. If he does play, feel much better about Edelman and honestly the other wide receivers. But if he doesn't suit up, honestly, the guy that I would be looking at more so is N'Keal Harry, that big body type of wide receiver. Edelman, I like him as a PPR type of option, but the way this offense is looking without Cam Newton, these are low-end wide receiver twos, maybe even in the wide receiver 3 category, that you don't want to play unless you really have to. As far as our sits, we've got Damiere Byrd, who, he's a smaller type of wide receiver, maybe similar to a Julian Edelman, and we just think they'll vulture a lot of opportunities from each other. And then KJ Hamler, like we said, a little bit nicked up, so we are sitting him. Then Browns at Steelers, Odell Beckham, Jarvis Landry. Very tough matchup here on a run-first offense. I see Odell Beckham as the preferred option, higher ceiling, maybe a better play in terms of standard scoring. Jarvis Landry as that PPR, higher target guy. I see Beckham as a mid-level wide receiver 2. Jarvis Landry as a low-end wide receiver 2. I'm looking at the running backs here primarily. As far as the Steelers, this is interesting. Juju Smith-Schuster, we will continue to play him. Yes, he's coming off a disappointment game, but that was the Chase Claypool show. And however, how much of that was due to Deontay Johnson, exiting that game due to injury? Because could Claypool be earning that number 2 wide receiver spot on that offense for the Steelers? I mean, if week 5 was any indication, then you would say he might even be the number 1 wide receiver. But we don't want to jump to any conclusions. We don't want to point chase. So what we will say here instead is if Deontay Johnson doesn't play, then yes, we feel good about Chase Claypool and even better about Juju Smith-Schuster. If Deontay Johnson does play, however, then I would be fading Chase Claypool. I'm not chasing the points. I see the number 1 option for the Steelers at wide receiver, Juju Smith, and whoever, is that number 2 wide receiver. If it's DJ, okay, go with him. If he sits, Claypool as low-end wide receiver 2s, Juju Smith with the higher ceiling. Then Bengals at Colts. I'll start Tyler Boyd and I'll start T. Higgins here. Boyd is the number 1 option for the Cincinnati Bengals. Yes, coming off a tough game where the Bengals couldn't get anything going versus the Ravens. I expect a rebound. AJ Green getting nicked up with a hamstring, but T. Higgins was trending as the number 2 wide receiver, closing the gap. So right now, in this matchup, I see both these guys as starts. I think Tyler Boyd, high-end wide receiver 2, T. Higgins, low-end wide receiver 2 with mid-level wide receiver 2 upside, especially if AJ Green doesn't play. And then for the Colts, we finally saw some life in T.Y. Hilton. I think he's got another good matchup here versus the Cincinnati Bengals, but I'm not expecting that much. I'd much rather start Tyler Boyd. Phillip Rivers right now, the way he's played, doesn't look all that great. I think Hilton is probably a low-end, mid-level wide receiver 2 at best. And then as far as the sits, we're sitting AJ Green. Look, even if he plays, he won't be 100% with that hamstring. Hasn't really clicked offensively. So at this point, I'm just starting to sit him. And then same with Zach Pascal. T.Y. Hilton's the number 1 option here. And then when you throw in the struggles of Phillip Rivers, I am fading him. Moving on, we've got the Lions at the Jaguars. And I think this is finally where we could see that big explosion from both of these wide receivers, Kenny Golladay and Marvin Jones. Now, obviously, Golladay is the preferred option. He's a wide receiver 1 on the week. I think you could argue mid-level wide receiver 1 with high-end wide receiver 1 upside versus this Jaguars defense. But I wouldn't sleep on Marvin Jones. I think this could be a high-end wide receiver 2 type of week. I'm looking at a touchdown from him. That's kind of what I expect. As far as the Jaguars, good news for them is this Lions defense not all that intimidating. Yes, I know DJ Shark has struggled. Maybe it's time for us to adjust our expectations with him as well. You could pair that up with the fact that Gardner Minshew will be inconsistent from time to time as well. But positive matchup versus the Lions here. I think he's probably a mid-level wide receiver 2, low-end wide receiver 2 kind of being the floor. And same with Laviska Shenault, who is trending in the positive direction, at least getting targets. So that's something positive there. And then as far as our sits, I'm sitting Keelan Cole. Yes, I know he had a touchdown last week, but I still continue to believe that the 2 most reliable wide receivers for the Jaguars are Shark and Shenault. So for that reason, I am fading Keelan Cole. Then we've got the Texans at the Titans. I'll start Will Fuller and I'll start Brendan Cooks. Obviously feel much better about Will Fuller. Yes, Brendan Cooks had that breakout game, but Will Fuller continues to be the guy that's more consistent. However, I will say this was nice to see from Cooks in terms of usage after the Texans made a change with Bill O'Brien. So maybe this could be a trend in the positive direction for him going forward. I see Fuller as a high-end wide receiver 2, Brendan Cooks as a low-end, risky, to some extent, boomer bust wide receiver 2. And then A.J. Brown, he's someone that is trending in the right direction in terms of coming back from his injury. I expect him to play. This Texans defense, not all that scary. He's going to be the primary option, I think, for the Titans. They desperately need to get him back, and I think he'll be involved in this offense. So I see him as a probably high-end wide receiver 2, especially in standard scoring. And I'm sitting Randall Cobb for the Texans. If Brendan Cooks continues to go upwards in terms of his usage, then I think Randall Cobb kind of becomes that next man out. That's why I'm sitting him here. Before continuing, I want to tell you guys a little bit about a new partner of ours in Thrive Fantasy, which is an absolutely awesome daily fantasy sports app that specializes in player props. And the great thing about Thrive Fantasy is that it's super simple to use, as they've eliminated the need to do countless hours of research because they only ask you about the top tier athletes in a respective sport. Literally, all you have to do is find a contest and join it. From there, just select the props you like and rack up the most points to win a share of the prize pool. And it's not just the NFL. There's NBA, MLB, PGA. Literally, you think it, Thrive Fantasy has it. In fact, Thrive has awarded over $1.5 million in prizes since launching in 2018 and has $50,000 guaranteed in prizes weekly. So sign up today, and when you use promo code ALLDAY on sign up, you receive an instant match bonus up to $50. You can download Thrive Fantasy on the App Store, Play Store, or by visiting their website, thrivefantasy.com. So stop waiting, sign up today, use promo code ALLDAY, and start propping up today. Afterwards, we've got Washington at the Giants. I will start Terry McLaurin, and I continue to say this. Benching Dwayne Haskins is good for this offense. Yes, Washington struggled last week versus the Rams, but that's because Kyle Allen got hurt. Then Alex Smith had to come in the game, so it was just a disaster. But either way, Terry McLaurin, you want to start him versus this Giants defense. I think he is in a similar type of situation to an Allen Robinson. He will get the targets. He's the primary wide receiver for this offense. And then I'm starting Darius Slayton without Sterling Shepard there. He's the primary deep play threat. I like what he did last week versus the Cowboys. This is a bit of a tougher matchup versus Washington, but right now with Shepard out, he is the wide receiver 1 for the Giants. I think he is in that wide receiver 2 conversation. And then right now I am sitting Golden Tate, who, yes, he's got some upside in PPR types scoring, but the way that Daniel Jones is struggling, he's clearly the number 2 option behind Slayton. Tougher Washington defense here, so I'm fading Golden Tate. Then we got the Ravens at the Eagles. I'll start Marquise Brown, but every single week I say this, and I'll say it again. He is a boom or bust guy. Just doesn't get a lot of receptions, much better in standard type of scoring. In PPR, I'd say he's a low-end wide receiver 2 at best, so keep that in mind. As far as the Eagles, I'll start Greg Ward and Travis Fulgham, coming off that huge game. But I will say, if Alshon Jeffrey plays, I'd probably be fading Travis Fulgham. Again, similar to Chase Claypool, I am not chasing the points with these young wide receivers. You're going to have big blow-up games, and then you're going to have a span where they kind of disappear. And this is a tough Ravens team, so keep that in mind. Honestly, in terms of the Eagles wide receivers, I think the best case you're going to get here is low-end wide receiver 2, maybe even high-end wide receiver 3. So I wouldn't be all that excited about the Eagles wide receivers as a whole. Obviously, Alshon Jeffrey, depending on how he trends with the injury, you probably sit him. That's the best bet right there. Then we've got the Falcons at the Vikings. And this is a good one in terms of wide receivers to start. Calvin Ridley, no-brainer start. I think it's safe to say he's the number 1 wide receiver for the Falcons at this point in time, especially with Julio Jones struggling to stay healthy. And that's why you see that asterisk next to the name of Julio Jones. If he plays, yes, you start him, especially versus this Vikings defense. But if he doesn't, then you have to consider guys like a Russell Gage, And right now, we'll say this. Calvin Ridley is the guy we feel most comfortable with. He's a wide receiver 1. If Julio Jones does play, even if he's at less than 100%, these are the only 2 wide receivers I feel comfortable starting for the Falcons. It'll be interesting to see how they respond after making their respective head coaching changes. Maybe that'll be, for the better, but Matt Ryan has also struggled as of late. So really here, the only slam dunk is Ridley. As far as the Vikings, Adam Thielen, we said it before the season kicked off, we loved Adam Thielen. He would get plenty of targets, especially without Stephon Diggs. And that'll definitely be the case here versus the Falcons. Justin Jefferson, he had 2 great weeks and then kind of a dud versus Seattle. But again, that's what you should expect from rookie wide receivers. He's not Stephon Diggs. That's why Thielen is more valuable. But versus this Falcons defense that's injury riddled, that's giving up points left and right, we like Justin Jefferson. Thielen is a wide receiver 1. Jefferson probably a wide receiver 2. As far as our sits, you see Russell Gage here. Right now, just the way this Falcons offense is trending, especially if Julio Jones plays, we are fading Russell Gage. Next, we've got the Jets at the Dolphins. I'll start Jamison Crowder here. I think that's a safe bet. He's an extremely consistent producer, especially in PPR scoring, by far the number 1 option for whoever plays quarterback for the Jets. But then Jeff Smith could be a sneaky type of start. He got a bunch of targets last week, and this Dolphins defense, again, not all that intimidating. Yes, the ceiling may be not as high depending on who starts at quarterback for the Jets, but just a name to throw out here as a potential dart throw in PPR type of settings. And then for the Dolphins, we'll start Devontae Parker, and finally saw something from Preston Williams. That is encouraging, and especially versus this Jets defense, I think both these guys, more so Devontae Parker, high-end wide receiver 2, maybe in the wide receiver 1 type of category, whereas Preston Williams, I'd be all right having him, as that high-end wide receiver 2. And then we're going to sit Isaiah Ford. He's that number 3 wide receiver, especially if Preston Williams for the Dolphins continues to trend upwards. After this, we've got the Packers at the Bucks. Devontae Adams trending in the right direction to return. We think that he'll have a great game, pretty much a locked and loaded top 5 wide receiver when he's on the field. The favorite target for Aaron Rodgers by far, so we're starting him here versus the Bucks. And then for Tampa Bay, Chris Godwin, if he plays, which it's looking like he will, then we're going to start him. He is a low-end wide receiver 1. Mike Evans, definitely more suited in standard scoring. He's been great in terms of getting touchdowns, but his ceiling is lower when Chris Godwin returns, probably a high-end wide receiver 2 on the week. And as far as our sits, we are sitting Marquez Valdez-Scantling for the Packers. If Devontae Adams is there, he will be the guy to target, so pass on MVS, and same with Scotty Miller. If Chris Godwin comes back, we are passing on Scotty Miller. Then Rams at the 49ers. I will start Robert Woods and Cooper Kupp. That's a good combo for the Rams. They're both, solid mid-level wide receiver 2s, high-end wide receiver 2s on a week-to-week basis. The 49ers are not trending in the right direction, and if they continue to struggle at quarterback, that will affect all sides of the football, the defense included. So I feel comfortable with the duo for the Rams. And as far as our sits, we've got Ayuk and Deebo Samuel as sits. Not really looking to target any of the 49er wide receivers until we have some more clarity on the quarterback situation in San Francisco. If Garoppolo plays, is he actually healthy? Yes, he struggled versus the Dolphins last week, but it was clear to see that he was still banged up. Maybe got brought back a little bit too soon. And if he's not playing, I don't care who plays quarterback, whether it's Mullins, I don't feel comfortable then starting these wide receivers. The Rams have got some nice pieces defensively. So in that case, I would fade pretty much all the wide receivers for the 49ers. Moving on, we got the Chiefs at the Bills. Tyreek Hill, obviously a must start every single week. That's a no-brainer with Patrick Mahomes. I expect the Chiefs to bounce back. He's a top 10 wide receiver. The Bills then, Stephon Diggs, the healthiest wide receiver right now for the Bills, so you continue to start him. He's in the wide receiver 1 conversation, especially with the way Josh Allen is playing. Then if John Brown does play a little bit banged up, I would start him. And Cole Beasley as well. Obviously, you elevate Beasley if John Brown sits. As far as our sits for the Chiefs, Mecole Hardman, Sammy Watkins. Watkins banged up, probably going to miss some time. Yes, that can be a nice thing for Mecole Hardman, but again, a little bit too boom or bust for our liking. If you need a flyer in terms of standard scoring, even more so, we should say that, because Hardman doesn't really get all those targets and the reception numbers, then maybe Hardman is worth a dart throw, but he's so touchdown dependent that we'd rather fade him. Then Cardinals at the Cowboys. You're obviously starting DeAndre Hopkins, a top 5 wide receiver so far. He's getting all the targets from Kyler Murray, and versus this Cowboys defense, we expect it to continue. And honestly, that's why we also have Christian Kirk as a start. We think these last 2 weeks has been playing well, and this Cowboys defense a good matchup here. So again, maybe a little bit boom or bust. I see him similar to a Marquise Brown. I think this is a positive matchup. Low end wide receiver 2, someone I'd be looking at more so in standard scoring. And then for the Cowboys, well, obviously the big news, no Andy Dalton, or I should say no Dak Prescott, insert Andy Dalton, which means that the ceiling for all these wide receivers goes down a little bit. But look, they'll still be the primary guys offensively, and this is a good matchup for the Cardinals. Amari Cooper struggled last week, but that'll happen. There's a trio of 3 great wide receivers, so from time to time, one of these guys will bust. I would start all of them versus the Arizona Cardinals, but just keep in mind the ceiling is lower. I still say Cooper is the preferred option, but now I probably look at him as a high-end wide receiver too. Same with CeeDee Lamb, who to me is the next best wide receiver for the Cowboys. Michael Gallup is the interesting one here, how his usage will pan out with Andy Dalton under center, but I would take the gamble on him this week versus Arizona. So with that, we wrap up this week 6 wide receiver start and sit breakdown. And as always, let us hear it in the comment section. Do you agree, disagree, along with any other start or sit questions you might have? And in the meantime, if you enjoyed, hit that like button, subscribe. Also, give us a follow on Twitter at AllDayPigskin to continue interacting with us and shooting us your questions throughout the week. And also check us out online at alldaypigskin.com. Sign up for a free newsletter to get free exclusive content. All those details in the description. But for now, we'll see you guys in future videos.